Monday here, isn't it? Yeah. Well, good everybody. This is a very late evening answer to all your questions on a Saturday night. So you're probably either still raging or just getting home and wondering what's going on, or you'll see this on Sunday, your time in Europe, and anyone in New Zealand watching might see it now. So we're not expecting too many people here, but anyway, it's a good time for me to get it done because we've got quite a few different things happening today, this afternoon. So, okay, so here we go. Most of these I haven't seen yet. I saw about half of them, but there's been a few more drop in the meantime. So, Guy Chester, does the weather data available for teams via HF Voice and HF Weatherfax equal what was available in the early Whitbreads? Okay, well, the first thing there is in the early Whitbreads, HF Weatherfax was considered to be too high tech for the Whitbread race, and they were banned. You actually weren't able to use HF Weatherfax. It was too sophisticated. And a lot of the weather forecasting that was actually transmitted by HF radio back then was by Morse code. And if you don't know what that is, it's did it, da, 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 did it, and you have to decode that into language. So you had to have some interesting skills. Not all of it was via Morse code, but certainly the stuff that had to go long distances with a reliable signal, the Morse code signal actually is very easy and clear. You don't have to worry about atmospherics. It's just a beep, 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 beep. You know, it's easy to get it through. So it was more reliable. Sometimes some of the voice forecasts were very unreliable, and some of the radios at the time were very unsophisticated as well. You know, the early ones, Che Blythe was a classic. I've mentioned this once before. He said his radio hardly ever worked. It was like a vowel set. Whereas some of the others had very sophisticated, for the time, very powerful HF radio sets, 400 watt and bigger. And that sort of held through, right? And, even in the late 80s, they were still, most of the Whitbread guys were fitting powerful radios, 400 watt or bigger, and getting reasonable bits and pieces. But certainly in the early 70s and the mid 70s and so on, it was pretty rudimentary. There were a lot of stations transmitting, but it wasn't like some of the current entrants are saying, where the current entrants said, oh, it was a lot better back then. We had all these stations. Da, da, da. If you read all the stories from those Whitbreads, it wasn't the case at all. And in fact, even in 1977, I remember well reading the experiences of Connie van Richthofen and the Flyer 1, the first Flyer. They were basically guesswork. They basically, not guesswork, they had a machine that decoded the Morse code, because they weren't up to the speeds required. So they had a super sophisticated receiver that would translate or convert the da 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 to actual letters, and they were able to then decode it and work out where the centers of the highs and lows were and things like that. But they were still all guesswork. When you look at how they were relating to King's Legend and some of the other ones they were directly in competition with, Great GB2 and so on, they were without a lot of weather. They didn't know what was going on. So that's the first thing to consider. The next one was, does Cape Town produce the same faxes and voice forecasts? Yes, they do, but not with any degree of efficiency, so I've been told. We actually, their HF forecasting, voice forecasting is not on a strong signal and not so reliable. Some of the areas that they are required to transmit on, they won't transmit unless you ask them to transmit. And of course, our guys only had HF radios to try and contact them to get them to transmit those zones. And they couldn't do it. In the end, we sent them emails to ask them if they could start transmitting for those areas, and we never really got responses. A bit of an interesting situation. And their weather faxes, they are transmitting them, but again, the power of the set and the antennas, they didn't allow any reliable reception from any long distance. Australia, on the other hand, is the reverse. Australia has a very powerful HF voice forecasting system that covers all their areas of responsibility. So if you've got a normal single sideband radio, you will receive the Australian voice weather forecast, and their Weatherfax transmissions are also pretty reliable. And so if you've got a well-installed set, which is important, you've got to have an amplified antenna, you've got to have good terminals, good connections, good earths, know how to use your receiver and so on, and you will get the Weatherfaxes. But sometimes then the printer on your own Weatherfax might not be able to print out the fine details. So there's all these other little challenges as well. New Zealand just recently, I think it was the beginning of this year, stopped transmitting their Weatherfax facsimile service. Okay, so New Zealand's not doing it, but there's other parts of the world, and it's only meant to be an aid for the OGR. It's a very worthwhile device to have for when you can actually receive the signals. And at the beginning of the race, we were assuming that it would cover about half the world, and it's probably going to do a little bit less than that. But when they get it, the ones getting the maps are really happy to have them. So not too bad. So given Perth, Adelaide, Hobart, Sydney radio coast stations have been replaced with the VMW Luna and VMC Charleville in very much inland outback Australia. Are the same Weatherfax charts available? Yeah, they are. Versus the Whitbread, yes, they are. Australia is one of the ones that, their stations now, which are all remote controlled from Canberra. So in other words, there's no guy sitting in these radio stations anymore. It's all done by internet and remote control in Canberra. But it's all monitored and they get it all out there and it's all pretty good. This is all from the one question. What about the Southern Ocean between New Zealand and Chile? Between New Zealand and Chile, New Zealand aren't using maps, and Chile, I'm not sure on that one. Certainly Brazil were doing some, but not very powerful. Can yachts get HF fax synoptic and HF voice high seas forecast? Yes, they can. The whole of the world's covered by HF forecasting. It's part of the SOLAS and GMDSS requirement that each of the countries sign up for. So it's the ultimate backup for if satellites fail, and that's how that works. So generally, yes, but it's still hard work. You got to know how to use your radio, get the skip going. Atmospherics have been really bad in the last few weeks coming across the Indian Ocean. So yachts haven't even been able to contact each other because they're split east-west. So you got to work the sun and the nighttime and the frequencies to get them. So radio is a bit of art and a bit of science and a bit of experience. So it's quite an interesting scenario there. John, did the original Whitbreads have waypoints in the middle of the ocean that wasn't an island? No, not at all. In fact, they didn't even care about the islands. It went port to port. So if you read the accounts and watch the documentaries from the early Whitbreads, they could go as far as they like. And sometimes, certainly once again in the second Whitbread, one boat actually got into pack ice. It was so far south of 60, right down on the Antarctic pack ice, going through, steering through pack as they're going that far south. And that was considered to be quite reckless in the end, many years later. And so there's no round the world race that goes far, that even dips into what would be considered to be the summer southern limit for icebergs. It's just too dangerous because some boats have gone missing. In fact, when I was in Cape Town, I never met up with John, but John Martin, a very well-known guy in South Africa, who was racing the same BOC challenge as me in 1990, actually whacked a huge lump of ice, got jammed in between his rudders down the back. Oh, no, hang on. He whacked a bit of ice and damaged his boat, and it eventually sunk the boat. And Bertie Reed, another sailor in the race, had to rescue him. And I think it was, I can't remember whether a bit of ice jammed in between his twin rudders at the back or whether that was Philippe Jonteau actually had a situation with some ice, but it broke free. But anyway, John Martin lost his boat through just hitting a growler. And other boats, there's one chap in a very sad story in the Whitbread just disappeared, not the Whitbread, in the Vendée Globe just disappeared. And who knows what could have caused that, but there were numerous cases where boats are sailing in poor visibility and all of a sudden in front of them is an iceberg, tabular iceberg, just a wall of ice. And if the wind's the wrong direction and you're going down, it's like a huge lee shore, and you might not see it until a few hundred meters away. So there were serious risks then. And believe me, I've seen a lot of icebergs. And I often used to say when I was on ships and using radar, and even on our own ship, we had our own ship, you sort of think, oh, jeepers, I wouldn't like to come up with that in the middle of the night with your radar, because some of the bergs, the density of the bergs and the big bits of ice varies such that the radar can go straight through them or not give a solid reflection. It can bounce off. It'll be perfectly smooth. And so even radar's not, that sort of reliable. Yacht radars, ship ones are. But anyway, so it's a whole subject in itself. Okay, so yeah, so there were no real waypoints as such. There was just a course, and but that's not the way it goes nowadays for around the world races. John, on the tracker, when you do a playback, the boats move every few minutes. Is that their real-time position? Not necessarily, or just estimates based on their 4-hour updated position. Just based on estimates of every 4-hour updated position. When it pings its position, it actually transmits a signal to the satellite that goes down to a receiving station. And so we've set it at 4 hourly during the transocean component. It closes up very quickly, down to 1 hour and then half hour and then 15 minutes going to the finish lines, and also starts up with multiple positions in the starts. And actually, as it's going across the finish line, it's only every few minutes, boom, 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 because the finish line is actually on the plotter electronically, and that's in the software program. So then it's real-time live. But in the case of the ice waypoint that everyone had to go up and around, it's only 4 hourly plots. Now, you can look at the weather going in and out, and over that 4 hours, you can see the distance that they would have need to go. So we're pretty certain that the speed of keep did miss the waypoint, but nonetheless, until we get to speak to them and see what happened there, we can't be 100% certain, even though we've spoken to them on the phone and they've conceded that looks like they have missed it. But we also need to consider the penalty. Now, the penalty is set at 72 hours, but it's not. If you miss a waypoint, it's a penalty of 72 hours. But every penalty we issue is subject to the facts. Once we ascertain the facts, then we'll make the penalty ruling, because you'll notice that it says a penalty plus a new waypoint. Okay. Now, if someone was so far south that it was tactically smart to give up 3 day or 72-hour penalty to keep going, right, and they just say, "Oh, bugger it," it's easier for us to take the penalty because it's competitive, gives us a competitive advantage, then we would say, right, you've got another waypoint now, and it's going to be hugely up north just to kill any competitive advantage you've got. In this instance, the speed of kip weren't getting any competitive advantage. It was a navigation issue, and they should have nonetheless allowed a big margin and gone around, but they weren't trying to throw the rules to the wind. So we didn't and have not placed a requirement to make them go to another waypoint, right? It's not needed because they went close enough to there, but they just missed it for navigation. That's the first thing. Secondly, we'll look at the facts and how far they missed it by and so on, and we will then determine what's fair and reasonable based on all the facts when we know them. So we'll have an interview with them and look at their charts and find out what was going on, and then decide what we want to do. So then we'll just, so you'll see what happens there. Asking because when we play back and speak, oh yeah, we saw that. Okay, Marcel, when sailing the shortest route between Cape Horn and Australia, the shortest route between Australia and Cape Horn, that should be, how do you sail by compass, as due east would be 90 degrees? Yeah, well, you don't sail due east, because if you just sail due east, it's not the shortest route, okay? And so you use what's called Great Circle planning. Okay, there's a formula that you can use. You can get it out of your book of tables, so you can pick the 2 points, and it'll give you a voyage plan effectively. But the other thing to remember is your compass goes out the window anyway. There's much bigger issues between some parts of the sailing, because the South Magnetic Pole is down off de Montdeville. In fact, I haven't plotted it for a long time. In fact, there's a side story. I'll do a Brian story here. You might be surprised to know that I was a party of two that were the first people ever in the history of mankind to actually locate the South Magnetic Pole. Me and Charlie Barton, a geophysicist from Canberra. We laid claim to getting on top of the South Magnetic Pole, which moves. It's a whole story for later on, but it was in our little ship, Sir Hubert Wilkins. And whoops, I just lost the light here. Little ship, Sir Hubert Wilkins. It was in the year 2000, and we plotted this thing. Long story. It moves very fast. It can move really fast, from 30 knots or 40 knots, and going around in a big ellipse shape. And I won't go into it, but yeah, we claimed the South Magnetic Pole. But the first time you sail down south, your compass is your variation can be up to 20 degrees, 30 degrees, 40 degrees, whatever. And eventually your compass stopped working. So when you're coming through the Southern Ocean on your way, sort of underneath Australia, the South Magnetic Pole cuts in and gives you some very big variations as well. So anyway, so yeah, it's a set of tables that you'll use to work out your your Great Circle route and waypoints that you got to go around and bits and pieces as well. Fortunately, I've never had to worry about sailing Great Circle routes, but it's just a planning thing that you look at. Usually you're sailing the weather. You generally know where you want to go, but you're never holding that line. You're never just doing that. You're saying generally where you want to go, and then you follow the weather. Okay, so that's how that works. Okay, what's been your biggest surprise of the race so far? Oh boy, I should have pre-read that and had a think about it. What's been the biggest surprise? I think the biggest surprise, generally, not a big one, but an important one, is the weather in the Indian Southern Ocean. I've been preaching to everyone, so watch out. This is going to be the tough one, and I mean, it just continues to roll on and roll on. And I think we can just about start talking about it, touch wood. There's been nothing like a Southern Ocean storm for the whole fleet all the way across the Indian Southern Ocean, except for Explorer and Sterner. And we, some people might say we went a bit overboard with that because we're thinking, oh, jeepers. But we just knew what that style could be like way ahead of time. And I didn't want to take any chances, all right? So we were super cautious with that one. But the rest of the fleet, they haven't seen anything like what I would call a serious Southern Ocean storm. So how lucky is that? Touch wood. They're not out of it yet, but it's still looking pretty good. So that's the biggest surprise for me. And the lows seem to be down low. They seem to be similar to last season when we had the GGR. So long may it last. I'm not saying they haven't had heavy weather, but they haven't had the sort of 15, 20 metre seas and 70, 80 knots and all that sort of stuff. So ask Captain Coconut, he got hammered with 3 in a row off Cape Horn when he was coming around his little boat sailing to La Sable d'Olonne previously. But anyway, that's been a big surprise so far, and I'm happy to see it. John Edward, my normal question, Don and Jane, what are your challenges this week personally, or AGR related to both? The biggest challenge was yesterday. This will sound crazy. I got whacked really hard with jet lag, call it what you like. The 4 days preceding, or the 3 days preceding getting on the plane in Charles de Gaulle, I didn't get much sleep on 3 nights. So I was pretty tired anyway. I slept a bit in the plane. We had to sit tight in China. We couldn't get out to get to a hotel for 10 hours, so we just sat there. Plane, blah, 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 things happening, and I was fine. And then yesterday, God, it's just hopeless. That was very interesting. But anyway, back on track now. And in terms of the race, biggest challenges is logistics, and our phones. We have something like 6 mobile phones, which are critical to the management of the race, and we've had some little issues with that, which is very frustrating. But we think we're on top of it, and the last issue will be resolved this afternoon. So fingers crossed. Okay. I've been a lifelong solo adventurer and simply amazed you'll have put together these amazing adventures. Oh, thanks, John. Yep, good fun. We love what we're doing. Margaret, will you still be in New Zealand when Sterner and Explorer arrive in March? They won't arrive in March. They'll arrive in January. What is their food and water situation by that time? Well, they topped up. When Explorer came back to Cape Town to fix up the rigging and so on, they'd lost about a week or something, so they just bought another week's worth of food, and Sterner's the same, so food and water's fine. The best we're hoping to see them here is maybe a week before the start of the race, and it'll just depend on what happens in the Tasman, I think. So just stay tuned for that, but they won't be here in March. So, and will we be here? We're checked to fly out of here on. We're going straight to Punta. And I don't want to. We're wasting a lot of airfares. We buy cheap fares, and they're non-refundable. So we're set to fly on the 22nd of January, and I'm pretty confident that the Explorer will be in and gone by then as well. And same with Sterner. So fingers crossed. If by the time the fleet gets close to southern New Zealand, the weather conditions allow, would a tactical move go around the outside? They can do whatever they want. We don't say where they've got to go. That's from Mark. They could go either side of New Zealand. It's up to them. Cut through Wellington Strait, because you could have something like a cyclone come down from the Pacific. This happens in New Zealand. a cyclone can just bounce down, it can bounce off Australia, come across and envelop the whole top end of the North Island of New Zealand. And if that's happening, there could be an argument, depending on what's going on, to say, oh, right, okay, following up the west coast of the South Island, so why don't we just dip through the straits there underneath Wellington and come up the other side? So anything could happen. Just watch this space. So it's getting quite interesting. Wayne, perhaps a 10-mile discretionary circle around the marks to allow for cloud cover. No, not at all. No, it's a waypoint, and you need to know roughly what's going on with your dead reckoning position. DR can be quite accurate if there's no currents. And you should be, navigator should be increasing the size of the safety margin for the assumed position when you're on dead reckoning position every day. Every day you might be 5 miles out. So if you haven't had a spot for five days, you haven't had a fix for 5 days, then you've got to allow 25 miles each side of your position, right? Not just one side, or you're in the middle, that's only 2.5 miles. So if that's the case, then you've got to allow a big margin to go around. So, and that's part of the challenge as well. So we don't want to make it any easier. We just make it common sense. Don't hit that point, it could have been a rock. Sophie, is the date for departure from Uruguay confirmed? Yes, it is. There was some mention of a staggered departure. No, the staggered departure is off. In the first Whitbread, what they did, they went up to Rio. Their stopover was in Rio de Janeiro. And they decided they would have staggered starts because they worked out the average speed of the boats at that point. And the idea of a staggered start was to try and compress the finishing time for all the boats. So, the slowest boats would go first and the fastest boats would go last by about 10 days. And that would just bring them all together as a group at the end. And that sort of is a good idea in principle, but it means that the boats, when they're leaving, they'll get different weather and that might affect the performance, or whatever. And so as much as it sounds like a bit of common sense, it doesn't necessarily work in principle. So we like the idea of the boats coming together for working out the prize giving. As it is now, the prize giving may be 3 weeks after the finish, because we don't want to hold the prize giving until the last boat is in, and we don't know exactly when that's going to be. So the prize giving may be in May. We're trying to determine a few things before the boats leave here on January the 14th. So stand by for that. But the start date Uruguay is March the 5th, and not staggered. Emmeline, can Penjuic 6 pass north of Tasmania through Bass Strait, or do they have to let south of Tasmania as their port side? Well, this question was a few days ago, of course, and it's pretty clear now they're going through Bass Strait, so they can. Yes, it wasn't, there's no set requirement to pass under the strait. What if you go through Bass Strait? Well, that's what they're doing. Having said that, I better look at the notice of race, because we discussed this. Lutz and I had a big discussion in the office a long time ago, and I'm absolutely certain it's not there. But we discussed the idea of forcing them to go around and underneath. And I said, no, you can't really do that, because sometimes the weather's a bit crazy down there, and it might be a smart move. So I'm certain it's not in the notice of race. And if it is, Penjuic would have read it, because they must have a copy of the notice of race, hard copy on board the boat, and it's not there, I'm sure. Okay, Fred. Hello. Looking at Penjuic's course, seems they want to let Tasmania on port side. No, they'd leave it on the starboard side going through. Have other boats done that before? I couldn't tell you. I forget the track of the boats in the first Whitbread. It's the only time there's been anyone going up to Sydney, and most of the others, I can't confirm. I'd have to have a look, but I believe most will have gone round the southern end of Tasmania and then worked their way up, because back in those days, you didn't have to go up to that waypoint, the ice waypoint, for instance. They were way down south, and so they'd be coming up in the middle of the Tasman. They wouldn't start to hook up until they're right past Tassie. But because the boats are up at that waypoint, the ice waypoint, they tend to not dip down deep again after that and pass by Tasmania. They don't have to go close, but pass by. The Bass Strait's pretty tough. You can get very bad weather in there. It's relatively shallow, not shallow to hit the bottom, but it's not deep ocean, so the swells are different, the seas are different, and you get a convergence of all sorts of local weather coming off the land effect, and so it can get a bit messy. But it's looking like, if you haven't seen the tracker today, we spoke about it, it's looking like it might work out okay for Penjuic. They could actually, if the forecast is correct in the next 3 days or so, they could actually do all right. Originally I was thinking, I don't know about that. But they had to do it. They're up there, but we're thinking, it's not going to work well for them. But now I'm thinking it might. What's the update on Godspeed? Something might have posted a while back and I missed it. Or Godspeed's out of the event. I think all but one has gone back to America. And I spoke to Taylor when they pulled out about the boat. They were looking at possibly leaving it there for sale. And I said to him, no, you've got to get it out of there. It's not the place to sell a boat like that. And I said, get it up to the Canaries or get it back to America or something like that and then sell it. So and they didn't, few of them didn't want to sell it. They're thinking 27 or other adventures and things like that. But it's a tough challenge for those guys, and we miss them dearly. Anyway, Marcus, talking about penalties, the final official result for leg one include all penalties. No, 2 lots of potential penalties have rolled over, or not penalties, but we haven't yet actually assessed a couple of issues on the communications with one boat, and there's also I didn't do the official report on the issue of sales for Evrika. The skipper of Evrika, Dominic, knows what the penalty outcome was, but we still haven't written that up yet, and we will do so. And they'll be added here. We didn't have time to do it before the restart, so the penalty is not going to be added to the first leg. It'll be added to this leg when we do the official results for that. Okay, I seem to remember that someone mentioned a violation of using Starlink connection and that a big penalty coming from that for one particular boat. Is this correct, or do I again remember wrong? No, there was a discussion. Penjuic had a special dispensation for their Starlink on leg one, and that ceased to exist for leg two. So Penjuic is not putting out photos and videos using their Starlink. They can't. It's not an approved system. And that may be something you heard about that. There was no issues there at the moment for anything else to do with Starlink. The approved translated 9 have got an approved Starlink, and Evrika have got a Certus system, which is not Iridium, it's an Inmarsat system. I think it is. No. Anyway, it's they've got a video transmitting one, and the others have got photographic satellite opportunities as well. Okay, Aaron, what's the first thing the crews want to taste when they hit New Zealand shores? I can't tell you. I don't know. Everyone will have some different ideas, I suppose. Some will be after pizzas, some will be after beer, some will be after social companions, some will be after family and friends. And taste-wise, New Zealand is a food mecca. It's a bit like Tasmania. Tasmania's got awesome food, and New Zealand is the same. It's a real foodie place, but it's not cheap. It's not cheap food. You can get cheap food, but if you want the best of the best, look at this. Look at this. I don't even know whether this is one of theirs. We did some shopping now. Where's this from? I'm not sure. Big mangoes, a favourite food. And the other one is, people will cringe. Look at that. Golden crumpets. You probably don't even know what they are. Australia, New Zealand, you live on them. Anyway, so I've got no idea what they might be after, but you're craving fresh food. That's the biggest one. So I'd say it'll be fruit, and there's plenty of good fruit here. So that's all cool. Now I've lost my spot. Okay. The ETA is based on which? UTC, local hour, NZ. It's a good point. I'd say it's probably UTC on the program, because I'd say it's probably UTC, but don't stress. We don't worry about that. The position times are on UTC. As the boats get close, once they're a day or so away, we start to talk about local time for finishing. And for those that are interested, they're sailing right down the harbour. You'll be able to see them all go down the harbour. The finish line is right off the clubhouse at the Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron, just before the bridge, and you can be along the breakwater there and see them cross the finish line. Or if you've got a boat, you can come out. It's an amazing harbour, and we'll be out there following them down. Ada and I will do the live Jane will be behind technology with the camera this time, so shouldn't be too many pressures about technology, making sure it's all working. So that's all fun. Does the OJR sell T-shirts to raise money? Well, we sort of selling T-shirts and hats and everything. We don't make money. We sell them and make sure we don't lose money. We do it as a service, but it's very hard for us. This is a real problem for us. But anyway, if you're in New Zealand, we bought over 4 boxes of stuff to sell there. There's T-shirts, hats, and bits and pieces, and there's a program and a few bits and pieces. But yeah, running the shop is a real dilemma for us, and we've got anyway, just too hard. We're there, but we do make money. We don't sell them at a loss, but we don't make it to try and make money. It's all a bit crazy. The shop's a tricky one for us anyway, but they're good T-shirts, good fun. What's the penalty for missing a waypoint? 72 hours, and be given another waypoint to go around. I spoke about that before. How does the IRC handicap work? Okay. I'll have to do something and send you to a real good explanation on YouTube and bits and pieces. But basically, if you can imagine, there's sailing parameters for every yacht. Like the longer the waterline of a yacht, so a small boat is going to be slower than a boat that's got a longer waterline. That's one. A boat that's got more sail area, more maximum sail area than a smaller boat, right, is going to go faster than a smaller boat. So that's another parameter. One boat that's got, say, 100 square meters of sail, and another boat's got 100 square meters of sail, but this boat only weighs 1 ton, and this boat weighs 3 ton. The lighter boat is going to go a lot faster because the sail area displacement ratio is a lot more favorable for the guy with the big sail area. A boat that's got 6 spinnakers on board compared to a boat that's only got 3 spinnakers on board is potentially going to perform better because he's got more sails to use when it goes thinger. So you've got the number of sails. And there's any number of other parameters that have to be measured on each of the boats, and they're all entered into a software program. And it basically says then that for, say, a 1,000 mile course, from the time you cross the start line there, 1,000 miles later, or it could be any distance, you're given a number. And if your rating is 1, right, so you've got an IRC rating of 1, it means that if you take 25 hours to go, or take 10 days to go 1,000 miles, your handicap rating is 1. So your IRC finishing time with your 1 handicap rating is 10 days, right? Because there's no change, it's 1. But if you come down to 90, so your is 0.90, then your handicapping is giving you an advantage. So that's sort of like 10% less, and I'm not getting too technical here, but it means if you finish in 10 days, you're actually going to go back in time. Okay, so it's like you got fast and slow boats. The faster boats are given a penalty, so you've got to add on time. So your penalty might be 1.15. So you've got to put on extra time to come and balance you with the rest of the fleet. I don't know whether that makes sense, but it's a number which is meant to slow down the bigger boats compared to the slower boats, so that all the boats are racing on equal terms. I think that's the easiest and probably as complicated as I need to get. So, okay, I think that's about it. Nothing more to do there. I better have a look at here of the back a look here. See how difficult it would be for the fleet when they reach the top of North Island, New Zealand. It can be very complicated. Can be really complicated. Because the weather is all over the place. And watch this space. It's quite fascinating as well, because they'd be going neck and neck, and you get one place where you might be getting 30 knots, and 10 miles further down the track, they're getting 5 knots or 10 knots. And it's very right until the last minute. Then they've got to sail in the harbour. It's a bit like the finish of the Sydney Hobart coming up the Huon there. So watch this space. It's a lot of fun. Hi, Don. Following all the Dominic from the Dominican Republic. Thanks for the effort. No problem. Happy to help. I'm wondering, does anyone know if we can purchase OG? Yes. Oh boy, I hate this stuff with the. I hate it because I'm embarrassed that we haven't got a normal shop like normal. But if you're in New Zealand, we've got some stuff here. Get here quick, and then we'll still have to try and focus on what we're going to do there. Mark, hey Don, could you tell us your thoughts on the in-mast furling for cruising? Well, in-mast furling is as good as the in-mast furling system is. There's some good ones and there's some bad ones. I had some friends from a long time ago. They sailed around the world twice with in-mast furling, through the Southern Ocean each time, into the sub-Antarctics, down to Antarctica, the whole thing. And they had, I think it was the Hood system of in-mast furling. It was actually in a Joshua replicant called Northern Lights. And they had that for, 15, 20 years or something. And it sailed really well. It was super efficient and it was really good. But I've read some horror stories where people have lost their boats and injured people with their in-mast furling systems because they're a little bit different type, and you've really got to know how to use the system and how to reef downwind and not get into trouble. So I wouldn't take an in-mast furling system into the Southern Ocean, but as I said, Northern Lights did twice around the world through everything. So it's personal preference, but nothing wrong with a good in-mast furling system, and I've never had one. So best is to read all the books, get online, look at all the YouTube stuff, Google it, get reviews, all that sort of stuff, and then make your own decisions. So, but as I say, I've never had one, but I've got nothing against them, especially when you're getting old and you want to do it easy, and it depends. You see, I've had one catamaran in my life. I had a Lagoon 450, and it was fantastic. I said I'd never get another monohull. Now I've got a Swan that I've never sailed yet, but there's some places I wouldn't take a catamaran. Right, but other places, wow, way to go! It's like ocean-going apartment. So there's horses for courses. There's no, they've got lots of choice and lots of opportunities to do things. Anyway, I guess they could use a genomic chart to plot the. Yeah, absolutely. I've got one of those. Yeah, you can. You can. There's a chart. Genomic chart is one that's got all the. It's not a Mercator projection. It's actually got all the bits in it, so you can draw lines on it and you can work out the Great Circle route rather easily. There is a complicated way to do it as well using tables. So, okay, that's about it. Enough talking for now. I'll see you later, and we'll do another Q&A when I think it's relevant. Thanks for the questions, and see you later.